Welcome and thank you for joining us at this video, how to fill in the program template. Now at this stage, many programs have or soon will start filling in their Interact program template. And with this video, we want to assist you in and answer some open questions which you might have in how to fill this template in. This video is also a preparation for the upcoming event on the 22nd and 23rd of September, post 2020, hands-on intervention logic and IP template. Please be aware that we cannot go into details in this recording now with questions dealing with indicators and also with interpretation of policy objectives. Therefore, we have planned other events and we would ask you to check our website. Yes, but back to this video. I'm very happy to welcome Dorota Wittolfsen with us today. She's working in the unit D2 and DG Regio. Thank you for being with us today and clarifying and trying to answer many questions which we have received already beforehand in the registration or from programs so far. Also with us is my colleagues. We will go together through the template chapter by chapter. It's Bessiana Ninka, Bernhard Schausberger, and also Katja Ecke. Thank you. Yeah, let's start. This template, as you see here, the version we use and the version which we will go through now, you can find it in the ETC regulation as an annex, but the version we use here is the outcome of a technical meeting of 23rd January 2020, and it has already some amendments of the council inside and some proposed alignment with the CP also by the Commission. So this is the version we are using for this video now. Dorota, do you think, is this the final version or will there be a more recent version? Is this still a draft version or is it, or can we consider it already as the final version?
Well, it is still a draft version, but we consider it a very stable version. So there might be, I mean, there will definitely be some changes, but they will be minor. So we encourage programs to work on this version.
There were also some, or there are still some misunderstanding with the names. This template is called Interact Program IP, is that correct?
Interact Program, exactly.
Another important issue which you have to consider when you are filling out this question, which comes throughout the whole template, is do you count the characters with blanks or without? And here it's crucial to know that the numbers which are indicated in the template are all counted with blanks. Another maybe general question, what are the most important aspects to keep in mind when you start filling in the IP template, Dorota?
In general, I think experienced programs will know this, that you need to indicate all the information which is required, obviously. Sometimes you want to be more specific, but you also don't want to be too specific. You don't want to put in too much information, which you might then later have to modify if you change something during implementation. So if there is information that you don't think is necessary to put into the template and it's not required, you might prefer to put it in some other program documents like project beneficiary manual or something like that. But I think that's quite obvious for partners who have already implemented one or several Interact programs.
We start with chapter 1.
There is immediately one program area. Sounds simple, and in technical speech, it will be mentioned in an implementing act later on, but it's quite obvious that the regulations will come out very late, and of course it's a vivid point of debate for many programs. So there's a question, because quite often, in particular in the CPC world, it has been mentioned that it's now core area, which is the NUTS-3 along the border. But on the other hand, there are quite significant signs in the regulations, but also in the border orientation papers, that programs should take a wider perspective, look upon functional areas. There are no more 20% rules, no more rules related to the eligibility of partners. So Dorota, could you say maybe a few words about how is it going to be? Will there be a continuity, or will there be a completely changing approach to the program area in the forthcoming period?
Well, above all, the program areas, which will be indicated in this section, will have to reflect the future implementing act on program areas under Article 8 of the Interreg regulation. This will not be available before all the regulations have been adopted and entered into force. So for now, for programs who are already filling in the template, they should stick to the text of the regulation as it stands now, which is the NUTS-3 along the border, and with possible adjustments to preserve some continuity. But that has to be well justified. And then the Commission will prepare this implementing act in consultation with member states, and in some time from now, I'm sure even before the regulations enter into force, we will know. It will be clear to programs what exactly to put in this section.
Brings us to the next point, the summary of main joint challenges, or what is quite often known as the so-called socio-economic analysis. Quite clear, we just mentioned here, since inequalities has been brought into the text, and at least we stumbled about the question, what's the difference between disparities and inequalities? So, and inequalities refer to rather an unfair, not equal state. So these are phenomena like inequalities in the access to labor markets or education, whereas still when speaking about differences in GDP at regional level, you will use the term disparities. And in addition, we've provided a tentative list of materials which you might consider going along in the programming process. And there is an obvious focus in the forthcoming period on missing links, and there is a very comprehensive study on missing rail links, or on obstacles. Same here, a very comprehensive study launched. And we would also recommend to look into the whole documentation related to the so-called cross-border review. It's the first tentative list of materials you might consider. And we're coming to 1.3, the justification for the selection of policy objectives and the Interreg-specific objectives. And Dorota, could you maybe briefly clarify at which level this justification should happen?
Well, we have had, we've been dealing with this question for several months now. It's been reformulated, and I think there has been some confusion about it. This section is exactly is the same formulation as in the in Article 17.4c in the regulation. You have to justify 5 different elements, actually. The policy objective or the Interreg-specific objective, the corresponding priorities, the specific objectives, the forms of the support, and address, where appropriate, missing links in cross-border infrastructure. So you have 5 things. What it might be a bit confusing is the table, the way the columns are set. But what you actually have to do is, let's say you have selected PO1, for instance, And under PO1, you have selected 2 specific objectives. So in the first line, you will write PO1 in the first column. Then you will indicate the selected specific objective in the second column, and then the name of your priority in the third column. And in the fourth column, you will justify all the 5 elements. So you will justify why you selected PO1, why you selected the specific objective, let's say number 1. And then you will justify the forms of support. So all in all, you justify, you provide all the information which is essential under the justification, within the limits of course, of characters. And then in the next line, you will write PO1 again. You will indicate again PO1, and then because you have a second specific objective under PO1, you will do the same exercise again. So that's the idea. I hope that's clear.
Now we got into the details to choose the specific objectives, and of course the choices between policy objective 1 to 5, but also Interreg specific objective being this Interreg specific 1 or 2. There are some misleading understandings because in our events that were tailored to Interreg specific objective 1 and 2, it was said by other colleagues from DG Regio that also Interreg specific 1 and 2 has to be considered at the level of the policy objective. So also meaning that also the specific objectives related to this Interreg specific objectives should be considered as at the level of the specific objective. But there's still a bit of needed clarity on this, and the question that I would like to ask you is, are the specific objective for ISO 1 and 2 to be listed at the same way as for the other policy objectives?
Yes, that is what we recommend. They are not formally specific objectives in the regulation as in other cases of specific objectives under policy objectives, and we don't know at this stage if we will be able to formalize it in the regulation and in the template. But we would like programs to provide that information. So if for instance, in this table 1, which I was just speaking about, if you have selected Interreg specific objective 1, then you should, under specific objective, list, for instance, trust building. Let's say the sub-objective on trust building. And then you will justify in the last column why you have selected ISO 1 and why you have selected trust building. And how, yes. So that is how we would like it to be, even if it's not formalized. It's not a formal requirement, but that would make most sense to understand the intervention logic of the program.
Thank you. And of course, there are a list of materials as further readings on the interpretation of policy objective 5 and also the interpretation of ISO 1 and ISO 2. So we just invite colleagues to have a look to the videos and the Q&A sessions and also all the other documents that we have provided in this particular session in our program website. With regard to this part, it's about the contribution and type of actions related to specific objectives and also macro-regional strategies. Of course, the best reference document for programs that to consult are the action plans of each and every single macro-regional strategy or C-basis strategies, provided here also the links to those documents. And it's important to involve in this particular phase of the programming strategy stakeholders in order to discuss how the program can contribute to the macro-regional strategies, bearing in mind also the partnership principle. Since areas of the programs can relate to one or more macro-regional strategies, programs have to justify the selected actions. And especially this might be something to pay attention for CBC programs to show the relation and the contribution between the cross-border program and the basing or macro-regional strategies. These are more or less what we can say in this for this section of the IP template. But in case you would like to complement Dorota, something about this session.
No, I don't think so at the moment.
Okay.
Sounds clear.
So the next chapter on indicators. And yeah, as we said, we will go more in details on in the event, but some general rules when you are selecting the indicators could be when you already, since you selected already the specific objectives that gives you already the context of the cooperation, we suggest that you focus with the indicator then more on the cooperation element when you define them, meaning that you select the Interreg specific common indicators. So in general, we suggest that you use common indicators, and especially if you select ISO, the Interreg specific objectives, we would recommend you to select the Interreg specific common indicators. It's also recommended to select 2 or 3 indicators per specific objective, so that you really can say something about the results you achieved. Otherwise, if you have too many indicators, it will be very difficult to have critical mass to say something about Interreg at European level. Here we have listed you some legal provisions where you can find all details about indicators and evaluation, and also some information on some videos and events where you get further information. But if you look at the tables which you have to fill out, table 2 on output indicators and table 3 on result indicators, it's interesting to know that for the milestones for output indicators can be 0 in case it's justified, meaning that, for example, you have some investment projects where you don't have much output at the moment. So here then it's possible to also indicate 0 as a milestone. For result indicators, there are no milestones necessary, but you have a baseline which you should indicate. Also here, it could be either 0, or if you have some information, it would be good also to indicate that here. More details on the output indicators and question on reference year we will then clarify in our event on the 2nd day when we go into details of indicators. You can find the common indicators in Annex 1 of the ERDF regulation. Let's move on to the main target group. Here, the crucial change to the last period is that with the target group in this time, you do not refer to the beneficiaries, but really this time it's meant to the targeted, to the groups targeted by the project. So not the beneficiary like in this current period. So that's the main change in when you have to list the target groups. And it would be good if you do that by specific objectives that then it's also possible to indicate that with 7,000 characters.
May I comment,
Yes,
Daniela?
please.
Just to clarify, in the current programs, programs were required to indicate both beneficiaries and target groups. In the new programs, we only ask for the target groups. And exactly as you say, the question comes up per specific objective. So in my view, the 7,000 characters should be sufficient. You just need to indicate, you don't need to explain who they are, but just indicate them. Like, for instance, youth or schools or environmental, non-governmental organizations. I mean, it can be very specific, but it can be also quite broad, depending on what your target groups are.
Okay, thank you.
That brings us to the next section, specific territories targeted, including planned use of integrated territorial investment or community-led local divestment or other territorial tools. It's quite clear that if you as a program opt for policy objective 5, it's 100% clear you will have to fill it in, and you will have to clarify your delivery method, which is then either integrated territorial investment or community-led local development. In that case, it's backed up by the regulation and the key features are in the regulation, or you opt to deliver in the form of other territorial tools. And in that case, it's quite clear that you have to explain a bit what you're about to do. And there are the key requirements related to policy objective 5. It has to be strategy based and it has to follow a multi-sectoral approach. And it's quite clear that you need to indicate, so the strategy does not have to be ready when you submit the program. And in that case, you should explain how you're going to do the strategy building, what will be your participatory approach, how you're going to implement multi-level governance in the overall approach, coming even to project generation, and also a bit an explanation the key stakeholders which will be later on also involved in the process of implementing it. That refers all to policy objective 5, but then there is a question whether it needs to be done regardless of the policy objective chosen, and that's a question to you, Dorota. Do you have any news whether this will be, so to say, compulsory even if you don't go for policy objective 5, or how this is
Well, I
going?
mean, I think in the case where you foresee using a territorial instrument under another policy objective, then obviously you will have to explain that. But if you don't, then could you scroll up again, please, to the title of? Yes. Well, I mean, you might always have specific territories targeted by your actions under a policy objective. You can have a wide program area, but you will have certain challenges, or you might have a functional area in health, for instance, because you have the right partners located in a part of the program area, and then you might want to explain that here. It might not be the case, and then you don't write anything. But if you have something to indicate, you do it.
Brings us to the next point, which we assume will be a point not taken up by many programs, the planned use of financial instruments. Here we found no further guidance in any of the documents related to the post-2020 period so far. So what you will find here is a brief description of the requirements according to the regulations which are currently in force. And it's quite clear that you need to describe the scope, but have in mind you describe it at level of the specific objective already. So, and then within the specific objective, it needs also to be clarified whether you implement the whole specific objective as financial instrument or just parts of it. Then comes quite technical information, which is also required. And what we mentioned here is just where to find it. So you can find the information in Annex 1, Table 1 of the Common Provisions Regulations. And there you will find the list. And the trick is that you will find various types of intervention, which are of course tailor-made to or mostly directed towards mainstream programs, ERDF, ESF, Cohesion Fund mainstream programs. So it might be difficult to cover all the actions you have in mind when designing your program. And this is why we gave a couple of indications of additional ones you might consider. I mentioned too the form of financing. It's quite clear that according to our experience by far, it's mostly grants being paid in programs, but of course there are other forms possible such as financial instruments. And then there is dimension 3, territorial delivery mechanism, territorial focus. And there are 4 sections in Annex 1 in Table 3. And one is on integrated territorial investment, ITI, the other one on community-led local development, so those backed up by the regulations. Then the option to go for other types, here we listed a couple of options, and then there is even a 4th, other approaches, which would mean, in our view, that you would choose to go for a totally different option in policy objectives other than PO5. But in principle, we've listed here the options you will find. And a bit of a question will be what to fill in, so to say, if you don't do any of these specific delivery mechanisms. So just the territorial focus is quite clear. So we might move on.
This is the part of the technical assistance, and as you can see, it has been crossed in the Interreg template in view of the simplification exercise that was undertaken by the Commission in these new regulations. The technical assistance will be not a priority axis per se. A flat rate mechanism is introduced, and each and every single interim payment would be fixed by a percentage and linked to the implementation of the program. Maybe, Katja, you would like to add something more on this?
To add on to what was already said to technical assistance, it's important to keep in mind when filling the financial tables for the so-called content priority axes that you will have to set aside part of your ERDF for technical assistance.
The financial plan, also here there is not much difference from the previous ones. So you have 2 tables to fill out. One, the financial appropriations by year, and the other one, the total financial appropriations by fund and national co-financing. So there is, yeah, it's not much difference than the last time.
Actions taken to involve the relevant program partners. And here it needs to be stressed that it should describe briefly for the preparation, but also for implementation, monitoring and evaluation. So for the full program cycle. And just to let you know that there still the European Code of Conduct on Partnership in the framework of the European Structural and Investment Funds is the guiding document. Also, the draft Common Provisions Regulation refers to that document. And to look at least into Article 6 of the draft Common Provisions Regulation, since it includes the minimum requirements. And the European Code includes then also some specific recommendations for ETC programs. But one of the key things is it's not only about preparation, but also about the involvement at the later stages of implementation and monitoring and evaluation.
And also the types of partners which are indicated in Article 6 in the Common Provisions Regulation, because these are the partners that all programs are required to involve in the process, in the programming process and in implementation and evaluation. So I think you have them listed here: urban and other public authorities, economic and social partners, and relevant bodies representing civil society, environmental partners, and bodies responsible for promoting social inclusion, fundamental rights, rights of persons with disabilities, gender equality, and non-discrimination. And I would just like to mention a few things, because programs are very different, of course. So the way you will involve the partners will depend on if you are a small cross-border program consisting of 2 countries, or if you are a big transnational program with 10 member states. And obviously, it will work differently. But there are some basic principles which are important and which we will look at when we assess the programming process and the program. And these are, first of all, if the partners which are listed in the regulation, Article 6, if they have been involved, that's a basic requirement. And then have they been involved throughout the whole programming process, which means it's not sufficient to just make a public consultation of a mature draft of the program before you submit it to the Commission. You have to involve the partners earlier in some type of consultation. They should have a say on in which direction the program should go, if it makes sense that the program cooperates on environment or labor market issues, etc. So this is important to demonstrate this. Then another question is, have the partners been selected in a transparent way? Are they representative of the stakeholders in the program? And also, how is the consultation taking place? Is there enough time and opportunities for partners to express their views? Is there actually a dialogue? Or is it just, a one-way communication? And also, do we as Commission have access to these contributions? It's a matter of transparency. And are the contributions of the partners actually taken into account? Or are they just listed somewhere? If it makes sense, of course. Are they actually taken seriously and being a subject of discussion? And then finally, there is also in Article 6, in paragraph 2, there is a provision on capacity building. We know that in many countries, the types of partners mentioned, like for instance, NGOs or social partners, don't really have the capacity to get involved in different programs, especially Interreg programs, which can be quite, a bit more of a challenge sometimes. So the regulation provides a possibility for capacity building. That is, you can use the technical assistance of the program to support partners if there is a need. So this is also a question we will ask, if in the cases where there is an obvious need, whether this has been considered and whether it has actually taken place or not, and if not, then why. So these are a few points that I wanted to mention, because we are already looking at this now as the programming process is ongoing, and we will verify it when the programs are submitted.
In Chapter 5, you are required to describe the program's approach to communication. So you should elaborate on objectives, target group, communication genders, including social media outreach, budget. So actually all the elements which are also in a communication strategy. That's why we recommend to draft a communication strategy covering the whole period, and then you could use that as a basis for your annual plans. And in the best case, this communication strategy has also an approach to capitalization. And when it comes to the target groups, it's quite good to consider also the different steps in the program life cycle, and then you can indicate the different target audience. Yeah, we have also summarized the important articles which you should consider when you draft this chapter, and have a link to an Interact event where we elaborate on how to draft a communication strategy. Question to you, Dorota. There has been some unclearance about the number of characters in the text field. Here it's indicated 10,000 characters, but there is another Commission guide where it's indicated to only have 4,500 characters. So how many characters you can use to fill out this text box?
Yes, actually it is 4,500 characters, just like for mainstream programs. We will have to align the template for Interact programs with this. This is one of the minor changes that you will see in the template, but you can already now be aware that it's 4,500 characters, so you'd rather stay brief in your explanations.
Okay, thank you.
Section 6 on implementing provisions. First, it's required to list the program authorities. What we did here is just to give an overview in which articles of the Common Provisions Regulations as well as the ETC regulation you will find these requirements related to the functions of program authorities. And if we move on, then it's required to briefly describe the procedure for setting up the joint secretariat. So it might be interesting to learn about the institutional background of the joint secretariat, the seat, the approach to joint staffing of the secretariat, etc. And finally, it's the apportionment of liabilities among participating member states. These are requirements quite well known from the current period. And I think at the moment there is not much to comment on that. Or
Section 7 is new following the meeting that Dani mentioned at the very beginning, and it mainly consists of a table, this table 11, in which programs are invited to indicate whether they plan to make use of Articles 88 or 89 respectively. And this further on links to the use of appendixes, to which I will come in a second, just to know that Article 88 and 89 are linked to the forms of reimbursement from the Commission to the program, meaning it regulates the level program commission, but not so much the level program beneficiaries. This is regulated through a different article. This focuses on the usage of simplified cost options and or financing not linked to costs, for which programs have the opportunity to formalize this. by making use of Articles 88 and 89, and they can do this by submitting the relevant appendices to the ETC regulation, which we have listed as the very last part of this template, where you can see that you have now also a slight change, 4 different appendices. One is the map of the program area. Then you have the appendices 2 and 3 relating to the use of simplified cost options as forms of reimbursement by the Commission and financing not linked to costs. And then the last one is the list of planned operations of strategic importance with a timetable. Maybe just important to highlight here that at this moment, only Appendix 1, the map of the program area, would be a mandatory element of the submission, while the other templates only need to be submitted in case they are applicable, meaning this is going to be implemented in your program like this. Dorota, I think there was a question with regard to the format of the map of the program area. Maybe you can say something about this, and maybe you have any other comments to those 2 aspects of the template.
Well, we don't really have any requirements regarding the program area. For all the technical issues like related to the SFC, I would prefer to leave that for later, because we don't know these details yet, if there will be any limitations, but there is no specific template for the program area. This is something that is up to the program to produce a map and annex it.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you. That brings us already to the end of the template and also of this video. Thank you for being with us till the end, and we hope we could clarify some of your questions already. And if not, please come and join us at the event on the 22nd and 23rd of September. There we have a lot of colleagues also from DG Regio and from the evaluation unit, which hope then to clarify the question which we could not answer now, or go into details in some fields where we didn't have the time now. Thank you and goodbye.